As one of the original 13 colonies, it should come as no surprise that New Jersey is home to over 600 battles, skirmishes, ambushes, and other notable historic sites. However, even after successfully giving the boot to tea and powdered wigs, the new government of this young country then found itself working through some growing pains. It turns out that rivalries, shady deals, mudslinging, and good old-fashioned political violence are not new constructs unique to our modern sensibilities, but rather honoring historic precedent. And if you think today's political discourse is dirty, may I take this opportunity to remind you that not only was dueling once legal, but commonplace. And one particularly significant event occurred in none other than Weehawken, New Jersey, the Burr-Hamilton duel. Welcome to Words and Coffee, where we discuss interesting history about the Garden State and showcase a bag of small batch roasted goodness. Today's brew, horse treats from Jolts for Colts. And the history is the duel between Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr in 1804. Let's get to it. Now, for many of you, I'm guessing that most of what you know about this incident is based on the account presented in the Broadway musical, Hamilton. As we continue, please bear in mind that the historical account differs somewhat. Except for the hip-hop, I will accept that as canon. The key players, of course, are Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr, the latter of whom was a Jersey boy, born in Newark and raised in Elizabeth. They were each members of the Federalist and Democratic Republican parties, respectively. Yes, that's Democratic Republicans. The R's and the D's were once on one team. Though arguably, that hasn't changed. The two men were in competing parties, yes, but the eponymous duel was actually about 15 years in the making. Back in 1791, Burr won a U.S. Senate seat from Hamilton's father-in-law because they hadn't figured out how to fortify elections to ensure the proper result. Now, Hamilton's motivations at this point were debatably altruistic. He saw Burr as a corrupt guy, but mostly because his father-in-law would have been more sympathetic to the Federalist Party's agenda, and Burr was now a hindrance to such. Strike one. Fast forward to the presidential election of 1800. I won't bore you with the gory details, mostly because they have nothing to do with New Jersey, but the short version is this. Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr were deadlocked for the presidency, and Hamilton orchestrated the deciding vote in Jefferson's favor. Strike two. Years passed. Burr, it turns out, had some trouble making friends, and when it became obvious that Jefferson did not intend to invite him to join the incumbent ticket for 1804, Burr opted instead to run for the governorship of New York, and Hamilton was waiting for him. I'm glossing over quite a bit here, but the punchline is that Hamilton heavily campaigned against Burr for a second time. And then came the letter. In April 1804, the Albany Register published a letter from Charles Cooper to Hamilton's father-in-law, which publicly excoriated Burr as a dangerous man who could not be trusted with the reins of government. Had a certain mustached Austrian painter turned politician been in their history books, I have full confidence that an equivalency would have been made. But the letter went on, teasing at a still more despicable opinion which General Hamilton expressed of Burr. And this, it seems, was our third strike inciting incident. Because when Burr wrote his own letter effectively saying, "Oh yeah? What were those more despicable opinions?" Hamilton effectively replied, I don't know. It was like a while ago, brah." Things deteriorated from there. Burr pushed back, saying, "I want a prompt and unqualified acknowledgement or denial of what was meant by despicable opinions." Reasonable. To which Hamilton remained steadfast in his vagary. Look, I can't be responsible for what Mr. Cooper thought he heard, all right? Just to be clear, history has largely painted Burr the aggressor here, but it seems to me that a dispassionate review of the facts will conclude that Hamilton caught a whooping case of the mess-arounds, and Burr was about to oblige him with a solid "find out." On June 21st, Burr wrote one final letter. Ahem. Political opposition can never absolve gentlemen from the necessity of a rigid adherence to the laws of honor and the rules of decorum. In other words, you took a very public swing, and I want you to acknowledge it. Put up or shut up. And once again, Hamilton demurred, saying he had no other answer to give other than what had already been given. His friend Nathaniel Pendleton weighed in on his behalf, saying, "Bro, that was like so long ago. Why are you still talking about that?" More or less. Eventually, Burr would issue a formal challenge demanding satisfaction, and Hamilton would accept. A date and location were chosen, and it was in Jersey. Worth noting is that even in 1804, dueling was being seen as an antiquated and barbaric form of dispute resolution, something in the purview of those less enlightened rustic types and an affront to cosmopolitan New York sensibilities. So they rowed across the river to do it in Weehawken. See, it was still illegal in New Jersey, technically, but the penalties were nowhere near as severe. Now, a quick word on etiquette. Barbaric or no, there were rules and procedures to this sort of thing. Each of the principals brought with him a second, essentially the guy who was meant to carry him back home if necessary. A neutral doctor was present but out of sight. And even though the principals were ostensibly shooting at each other, there was still an acceptable way to end this without bloodshed. More on that in a moment. Early morning of the 11th, the men drew lots for choice of weapon and position, a marginal advantage. They took the ground, at which point the seconds turned their backs. As this was technically illegal but relatively common practice, the Weehawken dueling grounds had been used some 16 times prior. The seconds looked away, so they could honestly answer, under oath if necessary, that they saw no fire. Which is a detail that I just kind of love, actually. It is for this reason that from here on the record gets dicey. Of the men present, pointedly not observing the events in question, there is disagreement over who shot first.
Yes, I bet you have.
But here are the facts. Two shots were fired within a few seconds of each other. At the end of it, Hamilton's shot ended up in a tree, passing within 4 feet of Burr's head, and Burr's passed through Hamilton's torso, lodging in his spine. Now, most all accounts agree that Hamilton had no intention of shooting Burr. However, as he had accepted the duel, he would have lost standing to withhold his shot by not firing at all. But there was still a neat solution here. See, by the Code Duello, the Dungeon Master's Guide to Gentlemanly Conduct, the intent of a duel was not actually to cause death or serious injury, necessarily, but it was to obtain satisfaction for an insult. Keep in mind that an apology often fulfilled this need, which Hamilton consistently refused to offer. However, even with pistols drawn, there was still a way out of this where all parties could walk away. You know, alive. To save face, a man just had to show he was willing to take a bullet. He didn't actually have to do it. Otherwise, most of the young nation's government would have been culled within a few short years following the Revolutionary War. In the practice known as deloping, one would traditionally shoot into the ground at a distance near enough to show that you meant business, but far enough away so there would be no mistaking your intent. Hammy didn't do that. Instead, he apparently shot into the air, around head level. Now, did he do that because Burr landed the first hit? Did he panic at the last moment and aim by reflex? Was he maybe just a little hungover from the big party he threw the night before? Which, yes, that part apparently did happen. But as to the precise order of events, Hamilton lingered for another 24 hours before eventually dying the following day, joining his son, who likewise met a similar fate at the same dueling grounds, actually. Hamilton's Federalist Party soon fell apart. While Burr never faced any legal consequences, he was indicted in Bergen County for murder, but it never went to trial. However, his political career was effectively over. Following this, the anti-dueling movement gained momentum and the practice was largely eliminated in the North. Several memorials were erected on the Weehawken dueling grounds, including 2 life-size statues of Burr and Hamilton, placed there in 2019. In 2004, on the 200th anniversary, the duel was reenacted by Douglas Hamilton, a 5th great grandson, and Antonio Burr, a descendant through a cousin. It all serves as a reminder of how even great men are not immune to folly, the danger of pride, and New Jersey's place in history. That'll about do it for me. If you stuck with me this far, thank you so much for watching. Sources in the description as always. This has been Words and Coffee. Until next time.